1. Back in the 80s, when I was between the ages of 4 and 6 years old, being the youngest of 5, I was often left alone with Mom. Sometimes I would help my mom with some house chores as best as I could. She was of delicate health. Particularly, I liked setting the table. I liked the symmetry of putting a slightly smaller plate in the center of a larger plate, and that larger plate in the center of a placemat. And I particularly liked setting the large plates because of how I got them to the table when I was little. They were behind some doors near floor level in the kitchen, so I could reach them. They were ceramic, the kind that many families only use on special occasions like Christmas. I was aware they were both heavy and fragile, so little me had to be especially careful. Our large plate stack had like 20 to 25 plates, and I would count how many we needed, typically 7 unless we had guests, which was often. I could carry 3 to 4 plates at a time without dropping or breaking them. Let's say if I was going to carry 4, I'd slide my hands in the large plate stack between the 4th and 5th plate, top to bottom, almost like a human forklift, and carry them on my tiny arms over to the table and slide my arms off in a similar forklift manner. Then I'd go back to the kitchen and get more plates and repeat till enough plates were on the table. Once that was done, I'd put each one in its place one by one. I'll give an example of the weird phenomenon that sometimes would happen. Let's say needed to set 7 plates on the table, so I opened the door for the plates. I'd slide my arms in, get, let's say, 3 plates, take them to the dining room. Yes, it is a separate room. Put my hands on the table, slide my arms off, leaving the plates, turn around, walk back to the kitchen, open the doors again, get 4 more plates on my arms, go back to the dining room to stack them on top of the first 3. But when I got to the table would be empty. Like no large plates on there at all. So I put my current 4 on the table and slide my arms off. Then inspect the situation. There's only 4. I'd count them again. Sometimes I'd yell asking, "Did anyone take some plates back to the kitchen?" I'd either get an answer that no one did, or no answer at all if no one heard me. So I'd shrug it off, go back to the kitchen, get 3 more plates, return back to the table, and it would be empty again. So I'd drop off my current 3 plates and I'd go back to the kitchen for more. At this point, the original clean plate stack in the kitchen is visibly shorter because of the ones I'd have taken already. But then when I got back to the dining room, carrying more, all 10 original plates would be there stacked, and it was too high up for me to stack any new ones on top. So I'd put my newest arrival of plates beside them. I'd feel both confused and relieved that my original 7 were there. Confused, I would see them on top of the other mats on their respective places, and then take the extra plates back to the kitchen and put them back in the original spot. Which I didn't like taking plates back because it was hard to open the little doors while holding plates on my outstretched arms. So I take the smaller sized plates, which I would grab with my hands directly, and I take them to the dining room table, set the stack on it, and then one by one set them on top of the larger plate, but then realize I'd be missing 2 or 3 larger plates. I would correct the number of plates, but sometimes I'd be shunned a bit because it would take me too long to set the table. Or at some point I'd drop a plate and was shunned for not being careful, or they would just say that I was too distracted to complete it properly. Or other times, once it would fully set and we were ready to eat, but turned out there'd be a place missing all the dishes. This would happen not only with dishes, but also with salt and pepper shakers, paper towels, flatware. It kept on happening on and off for years, till we moved out, when I was about to turn 18. Even my then girlfriend told me of this happening to her while helping me set the table at my house. She'd be confused like, "I was sure I'd brought all the plates already." And I told her, "Yes, that happens here. Just get some more." It would happen with other stuff too. If you're getting ready with snacks to watch a movie, or moving school stuff to a desk to do homework, or simply packing for a trip, or even getting ready to brush your teeth, you'd have your toothbrush next to the sink, open the toothpaste and find your toothbrush in another room, or back on its toothbrush container. Usually, it didn't leave a feeling of fear so much as confusion. Fear happened when creepier stuff occurred. When this phenomenon happened, Oftentimes there would be a feeling of unease. Other times it would be accompanied by phantom whispers or shadows in the corner of your eye. Things didn't always fix themselves by the end of a task. Sometimes, said task had to be MacGyvered to completion, or abandoned because a critical main item just didn't appear back in time. Sometimes till days later, or it was found in a very odd place, like ketchup in the garage, or plates in the front yard, or hair gel in the car trunk. It's easy to discard some of these with semi-absent-mindedness and easily distracted personality, but many of these occurrences couldn't be brushed off that easily, especially when they happened to someone else and witnessed by you. I don't know if it's exactly the same phenomenon, but one of the scariest experiences for me was... I was sitting in the dining room with a cup of coffee. Must have been 16 or so. It was late. I already had the heebie-jeebies that night, as I often did whenever alone in that house. But I was doing homework. At some point I was rubbing my face and I felt I heard my coffee cup being taken away. And I thought it was my mom, because I heard her loud slipper drag walk approach me. And she'd be the only one to tend to me at that time. And I said, wait, I'm not done with that. As I looked up, and I saw no one. Then I heard stuff dropped in the kitchen. I ran over and saw my coffee cup and spoon in the sink. I nubbed right out of there to my mom's room, and stayed with her till the rest of my family got back from bowling night. 2. From my earliest memory up to the age of 20, my family and I lived in a house that we swear is haunted. My sisters and I all have stories about encountering ghosts. I'm sure that our parents had such stories too, but sadly, they're no longer with us to share them. I figured I would at least share some of mine here. Story 1. 3 Ghosts in the Window. This happened when I was pretty young, I think maybe 8 years old. I was downstairs in the basement playing with my Hot Wheels cars in the rec room. First thing to know about that basement is every time I would walk down the stairs, I would always get this eerie feeling that I was being watched. I'm not the only one who feels that way. My sisters and later my eldest nephew all noticed it. Anyway, this particular day it was late afternoon or early evening in the summer, so the sun was low in the sky and sunlight streamed in through the basement windows which looks out onto the backyard. As I was playing, deliberately sitting in the patch of sunlight on the floor, I noticed the shadows of what I assumed was 3 people walking past the basement window. Being a curious child, I wondered who was in our backyard, so I got up, went over to the basement door which leads to the carport, and went into the backyard to take a look. My backyard was empty. The backyard is quite large. There is absolutely no way that anyone walking at a regular pace, which those 3 shadows were, they weren't in a hurry, could walk all the way over there to the opposite side of the house before I could get outside and see them. Even if they had started running right after passing the window where they cast their shadow, I at least would have been able to see them just as they turned the corner at the far end of my house. Creeped me the hell out. Story 2. The Squeaky Floor. This happened to me when I was about 12 or 13 years old. First, I need to explain the house I grew up in. The floors on the main level squeaked terribly. Particularly, every square inch of the floor made a squeaking, creaking, or groaning sound when stepped on. What's more, each area of the floor made a very distinct sound when stepped on, so that you could tell exactly where someone was inside of the house by the sound that the floor made. Anyway, I was home alone this particular evening. I was sitting in the lazy-boy armchair in the living room, with one of the leaves from the dining room table across the armrests to use as a table, doing my homework. As I was working, I heard the sound of someone coming out of my parents' bedroom and begin walking down the hall towards me. I stopped what I was doing, turned around, and looked down the hall to see who was there, and the hallway was empty. The moment I turned to look down the hall, the sound stopped. I shrugged it off and went back to work, when minutes later, the floor started squeaking again. Whatever was making the sound got right in front of the bathroom door. Then I turned to look again, and the sound stopped. I sat there, staring silently, daring the entity to continue making noise while I watched. Not a sound came down the hall, so I went back to doing my homework. A few minutes later, the squeaking began again. I waited for the sounds to reach the top of the stairs, right in front of the kitchen door, and I turned around and stared again. Once again, the sounds stopped. I turned back to my homework, and a moment later I heard the floor squeaking their way into the kitchen. It was at that point that I said, "Screw it." I set my homework aside, turned on the TV, and started watching Guns of Paradise, starring Lee Hornsey. Story 3, Tea Time. This is a relatively short story, but a creepy one. I like drinking tea. I drink a lot of tea. I far prefer drinking tea over drinking coffee. Anyway, one cold winter day I was sitting at home, enjoying a cup of Earl Grey tea, and watching the snow fall past the streetlights from the living room window. Suddenly, I heard a really loud bang in the kitchen, as though someone had slammed the cupboard doors really hard. I jumped up and spilled tea on my shirt. I got up and went into the kitchen to see what the racket was. The cupboard doors, where we kept the coffee mugs and dishes, were sitting partially open, as if someone had slammed them really hard and they bounced back open. Here's the thing, though. When I had fixed my tea, I had left the cupboard doors closed. What's more, all of the windows in the kitchen were closed, so the likelihood of it being the wind is virtually non-existent. The cupboard doors had opened themselves, slammed themselves shut with enough force to bounce back partially open, and stayed there. Creepy. Story 4. Just saying goodbye. This happened when I was 20 years old. It was the night before I was moving away to go to college. My mom, my best friend, and I were all standing around the living room, just talking. Suddenly, the TV turned on all by itself. It stayed on for a minute, and then it shut off. I looked around and saw the TV remote control was laying on the coffee table, and not one of us was anywhere near close enough to have hit the power button, deliberately or by accident. I just laughed and said, "I guess the ghost is saying goodbye in his own way. I'll miss you too, Casper." I knew it was the ghost and not just a glitch in the TV, because the TV was too new to have glitches like that. 3. I grew up in a house built by my father, in a small town that were only fields, a lake, and forests around it, when the house was built. The house was not built on some weird grounds or anything from what I know. To cut to the chase, I've experienced some things while I grew up there. When I was a little child, I don't know exactly how old I was, but I estimate around 5 years old, I remember crying in my bedroom. We had lots of bedrooms in the house, so everyone had their own, because I was upset with something. I can hear my parents being in the living room farther away, and while I cry, I look towards the door to my room, and suddenly, from the right of the doorway, there is someone peeking into my room looking at me. I did not recognize this person, and the weird part of it was that the person had really big eyes, and when I saw this face I stopped crying because I was in a kind of shock. I don't remember much after that. Later on, I have nightmares about the hallway in the house, frequently. The hallway never felt good. That's where the face with the big eyes peeked from. I always had my door closed to the hallway after that. Years later, one night I wake up in the bathroom sitting on the toilet, and I can see in front of me 2 worrying parents. I ask them what is going on, and asking them how I ended up in the bathroom. They didn't even respond to my question and just wanted me to go to bed. I was totally oblivious to what was going on. I literally asked if I had vomited because looking down into the toilet water, it kind of looked like it, but since I actually sat on the toilet, I was wondering why I was on this toilet to begin with. I don't remember any smells. The nightmares. Continuous throughout my entire childhood, up to 15 years of age. I usually was awake at night because I hated school and I thought the internet was a lot more fun, but during those hours I felt watched from the keyhole in the door to the computer room. Out of all the nightmares I had about the hallway, and some nightmares even went further into the living room, I remember one dream where I woke up in my bed and had the urge to look under my bed, and I did. I saw what you would call a muscular demon with pitch-black eyes looking at me. But it wasn't looking at me because I could feel that it was sleeping. It just didn't have any eyelids, like fish sleeping in the sea. I don't know how long after that, but it wasn't long, maybe a week or two. I woke up to the sound of something really horrifying. I heard the sound of something in the hallway that sounded like a crossing of a beast and a human that was either in pain or rage. It was a really troubling sound, and I remember being in total fear, and I hid under my cover in bed and just tried to listen to every possible sound around me, and I didn't hear anything after that. While all of this happened to me, I remember my sisters were telling stories, how their legs were pulled at nights by an invisible force, but years prior to my, what I would call, encounter of a demonic roar. During daytime, I remember sitting in the living room by myself and totally alone at home, just daydreaming, and all of a sudden, the stereo would go off on a radio show on extremely loud volume. I jumped up like crazy, not knowing what was going on. I told my dad later, and he said that it's basically impossible for it to start like that. He's an electrician and tech guy, so I believe him. This was in the mid-90s. During all of this, my mother died by cancer, and my brother also died in a weird motorcycle accident. My little sister is basically brain damaged and isn't herself anymore. I've always sort of blamed the house because of its negativity. What I believe is causing harm in all sorts of ways, but I can understand that it sounds like I'm trying to find something to blame for the damage to my family. The house was eventually sold, and another buyer burnt himself to death in the garage in less than a year. I moved far away from my childhood home. I miss it because it was a sanctuary for me, but at the same time I don't, because of all the really scary stuff going on there. It's like a bittersweet sort of way. My ex and I were visiting there while my father still owned the house, and we were sleeping over for a weekend. I closed the door to the room we were staying in, and my ex was asking me why the door couldn't be left open. I just told her it had to be closed. Period. I never told her all about the events in the house prior to our visit. I was sleeping closest to the door, which gave me anxiety because I was so close to the hallway, and also in the room that was my deceased brother's room. Long story short, ever since I left the house, it feels like something followed and is attached to me in a discreet way, like I'm carrying a passenger on my back that has malevolent intent towards others if they hurt me in some way. I particularly recall a random guy laughing at my experience. I sensed it somehow, and we left the restaurant. We came back a bit later, and he had a heart attack, and the paramedics tried to revive him. This was after my mom and brother died, though, and to be frank, my mom kind of abused me too when she was angry, pulling hair, pulling ears, and so did my brother, hit me everywhere. So the thought is something has tethered to me, and is actually causing harm to the people around me that are harming me. I would like to add something about the keyhole stuff while I was in the computer room. At that time, I was feeling extremely watched, and I went many nights peeking through that keyhole because of that. I never did see anything in the darkness, though, but it was creepy as hell. Something really is in that hallway, and now the building has been rebuilt, so that hallway is not in the same way. I have not investigated the status of the new family, but I'm pretty sure they are the victims of something really dark. 4. When I was around the age of 5 to 7, I had 3 vivid encounters with a ghost dog that I still remember to this day. I will try my best to paint a picture with words so that anyone reading will have a better imagination of what I went through. All of this happened in Nova Scotia, Canada, at a house with a number 111 on it that was built upon a former pool. My father and I also see the number 111 everywhere, be it in my health, in a game, score in a game, or even the time. We believe it to be an angel number, as it says that someone is watching over you, and it would seem to be my father's mother, as I never got to meet her since she passed away before I was born. Through all these encounters, The same one feeling was felt through all of them. A burning, boiling blood sensation, like extreme anxiety, as if you felt something bad was about to happen, almost entirely felt on my back. Heavy anticipation and nervousness. I have also felt this feeling when hearing the repeated slow drips of a faucet for some reason. The first encounter was when I was sleeping in my mother's bed. She usually slept on the couch and gave me the whole bed. That would later become my room after my sister moved out. I was laying on my back, with the lamp to my left still on, and the doorway to the left in front of the bed was open, with the living room light still on due to my mother still being awake. I think I had just been put to bed and was still very awake. Randomly, I had said the word dog. I cannot remember why I did that. I may have felt some sort of pressure to say it. In front of the bed was a dresser with a huge mirror that my mother still has. To the right of me was a stack of pillows and blankets that was on top, in my old crib that I had. None of these pillows had sheets on them, and there was no fan on in the room. After the word dog was uttered from my mouth in a whisper, a pillow that was on top of the stack flew down onto the floor like someone tugged on it and pulled it down. My head snapped to the right as I saw it happen, and I could see from the reflection in the mirror that there was nothing there. I froze and pulled the blanket up to my chin and tried to hide, but I felt something going up to the edge of the blanket near my feet, so I stayed still. I felt it grab or bite my foot. I can't remember which one, but I'm inclined to believe it was my left. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. Nothing would come out of my mouth, but I couldn't move. Eventually, I was able to muster energy to scream, although it was weak, and was like I had no air in my lungs. But after a few hollow yells for my mother, she finally heard me and came running to help me. The second encounter was when I was laying down on a small, fold-out Spider-Man couch that turned into a mini bed in the middle of the living room on a cloudy, overcast day. The window was behind me, above a couch. I had a blanket over me, and my mother just went to get a shower. As I was waiting for her to get out, I turned my head to the right and stared at my sister's room, which I think at this point might have been my mother's since my sister moved out. It was dark. I had no access to a window, and I couldn't stop staring for some reason. Eventually, I looked away to my left to look at the bathroom door, and then looked back to my right. Face to face with me was a black, misty, wispy dog, with glowing dark orange eyes with ears that pointed upwards. I quickly hid my whole body and my head under the blanket and didn't dare to move a muscle. It was only until my mother got out of the shower that I then removed the blanket from over my head. The third time was when it was a bright, sunny summer afternoon. I was playing in what was my mother's room from the first encounter. I was sitting cross-legged, and I had my back to the open door and was messing with my Legos on the floor. All of a sudden, I feel that burning sensation heavily up my back. By this time, I had got familiar with the feeling and quickly became scared. I froze, as that was the only thing I knew I could do, and I heard what sounded like dog's nails, tapping on the old tile in the kitchen and the hallway that led to my room past the bathroom. Behind me, I heard them scurrying towards me, and I refused to turn around, and somewhat hunkered my body forward, thinking I would be attacked. As the sound got closer, 3 black ghost puppies ran straight through me. They had the same black wispy form that the large dog did from the encounter, but their ears were down instead of pointed up. They ran past where I was playing with my Legos and under my bunk. Was once my sister's that she gave me when she moved out. As they ran through me, I couldn't move, but I could see what was happening. Once they went under my bed, I was able to move again. I bravely checked under my bed and looked around, but there was nothing. After that encounter, and I saw that it was puppies for some reason, I felt happy. I didn't feel that scared emotion afterwards like previous times. Since then, I never encountered the ghost dog or its puppies ever again, and that burning sensation was never felt again either. I had moved twice from that house, apartment building, and never had a similar experience since. My grandparents on my mother's side had a dog that I loved dearly as a kid. I loved her so much. I named my first stuffed animal after her, but the dog passed away a few years after I was born, and they got 2 Shih Tzus and a third one later on. The first 2 were given away, and the third one was passed down to my uncle, which later on had puppies as well. Both those grandparents are now passed away. To make things clear, I have zero history of fainting, passing out suddenly, or sleep paralysis. As a kid, I would often sleep over at my father's apartment, and none of this would happen. I've read online that several people have had encounters in my province with shadow or ghost dogs. As close as Antigonish or Dartmouth. There are also tales in the United Kingdom of a ghost dog or hellhound attacking a church. If anyone could help me understand any of this, if it has meaning at all, or if anyone enjoyed listening to my experiences, please feel free to leave a comment below, and I will try to reply the best I can to any questions. 5. I had no opinion about the paranormal. I may have seen a cigar-shaped UFO from my front yard when I was a young girl, but I may not have been old enough to understand what it really was. I've had sleep paralysis, hypnopompic hallucinations where the devil is swirling around my bedroom as a black mist, but discovered there was a scientific explanation. As a mere mortal, I don't think I had the knowledge to pronounce an absolute. Now on to the story. My mother is first-generation American. Her parents moved to the US in the 1920s from Glasgow, Scotland. Although the family was fully immersed in American culture by the time I came along, I was proud to be of Scottish heritage. Although the thought of haggis and blood pudding was a bit off-putting. So, when we decided to take a family trip to Europe, of course I voted for Scotland. I've always been a bit of a restless soul, but the moment we touched down in Edinburgh, I felt like I was home for the first time. I can remember sitting in a local restaurant thinking, I could live here. I could just disappear and make a life here. These were not the sort of thoughts I usually had. They lingered, but I didn't think they meant anything. One drizzly day, we headed into the Highlands on a small tour bus. I knew some basics about Scottish history, the Battle of Culloden, the history with the English, etc. All chums now, of course, all chums now. But I grumbled under my breath when we got herded off the bus to stand on the damp roadside. We were at Glencoe. I knew nothing about it. I read the road marker that spoke of the massacre. 120 soldiers were billeted with the MacDonald clan under the culture of hospitality. In the winter of 1692, these troops were ordered to kill every Glencoe MacDonald, men, women, and children, in the early morning hours. 38 people were mercilessly slaughtered in the attack, including the elderly and infants. By luck, some were able to escape on foot through the glen. 40 more of the 120 residents died from exposure. As I read this, my anger raged. I have MacDonald blood. Then I looked at a narrow rocky path coming down the mountain, the path to safety. All of a sudden I could see people scrabbling down. It wasn't the lush green of spring, but a dark, icy path. The wind viciously blowing snow, one woman holding a baby was wrapped only in some blankets. She was barefoot on the snow. Our eyes met, and immediately it was me climbing down. My feet were numb. I was terrified. This was not supposed to happen under the rules of hospitality. Where was the rest of my family? Why did they do this? I don't know where to go once I'm off the mountain. I'm afraid for the son I carry in my arms. Had I ever been this way before? Would I be able to get up if I fell again? Would we make it? My mind raced, and my cold, now bloodied feet raced too. Then the bus driver called us to load back onto the bus. I looked away, then back up. But it was a dreary spring day again. I don't know if the woman and her son survived in 1692, but I know she survives in me. Every Glencoe calls to me. Every day I see her face, the desperation in her eyes. I'm not sure if she's with me because I bring her relief that the clan lived on, or if I need her to remind me of the strength of my roots. It was a few years later that it struck me. I was born 268 years later to the day, 13th of February, from the massacre. This makes me certain that what I saw and felt was real and not my imagination running wild. I saw the ghosts of Glencoe. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 393. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you'd like to become a channel member, the link for that is below. There are also various links in the description, such as Patreon and my merchandise store, if those options appeal to you too. Okay, let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question, I think we'll take this from the question that Lauren put underneath her story. What's your favorite conspiracy theory? Roswell, alien lizard overlords, the moon landing was faked? Was there more than one shooter on the grassy knoll? Well, my favorite is eminently silly. And this is an old one, a very old one. But there's a modern version of it too, and that is quite simply that Paul McCartney died when he was younger, pre-Abbey Road, and he was replaced with a look-alike that just so happened to have the same face, sing just like him, play just like him, write just like him, and everyone was totally fine with this. So the guy that we know as Paul McCartney was actually someone else entirely. The modern version of this, for those who haven't heard, is that Avril Lavigne died and was replaced with a look-alike at some point. So I assume that Paul and Avril hang out and tell stories of their former lives. Anyway, of course it's completely untrue, but that's probably the one I think is the most entertaining. Feel free to share your own in a comment below. And before we go, let's have a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And this one comes from Paranormal Stories 3921, and I think this was about infused water, like water flavored with stuff. And today's answer comes from Nova Brilliant. Fruit and water can be quite refreshing. I love lemon slices, but cucumber can be nice too. Thank you very much for your answer, Nova Brilliant. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. The rooster is roostering nearby, so time I stopped recording for the night, I think. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.